Good day. I would like to start off this morning by talking to you a little bit about Built for God. Built for God was originally a vision given to a friend of mine, Keith Wang, who thought about the whole idea of bringing people closer to God, bringing them closer to God so that there'd be a sense of growth in them. And when I look back at what's happening today, this seems to be a very appropriate vision, an appropriate vision to address our times. Because if we look back at human history, we find that mankind from the beginning was trying to thwart or destroy or frustrate God's design for the human creature, the creature that He created. The design was that mankind would be forever united with the Lord, united here on earth and also in paradise. And at the beginning, there was an attempt by chapter 5 of Genesis to build a tower to heaven. Sort of an idiotic idea right now as we consider it, but again, they were very in earnest about it. And when the Jews were delivered from the slavery of the Egyptians and they were in the desert of Sinai, they quickly forgot who had brought them there and how it had been accomplished. Freedom from slavery that was 40 years old at the time. And they immediately began to build idols made of metal and copper and stone and all of that. And they said, this is your God, O Israel. And throughout history, we've had heresies and all of those things that have sort of propped up the belief that we're in charge and we can have our own beliefs come what may. And yet, God's design is for us to be happy. His antecedent will is that none of us would perish in any way, or none of us would drift away from God. And then we go to the big one in the 16th century when Martin Luther, John Calvin and Zwingli, all of them sort of founded our own church and really sort of rejected a lot of the church's teaching that had been approved by councils and so forth. And now we come to our modern times and we see something very similar going on. But what happened in the 16th century is not over with. It's still going on in different parts of the world. And again, we have our church, the Catholic Church, built for God, really prospering in some way. And we need to get back to it. Augustine had it right when he said, Thou hast made us for thyself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. And that whole idea of peace and love, the internal virtues that allow us to grow and to have a sense of what God created in you and in me, in each one of us individually, to begin to realize that. And we have a whole sense of going the opposite way. Don't go in the opposite way, sort of rejecting anything that has to do with basic goodness, God's goodness. When we know that because God looked upon all He had created in Genesis and saw that it was good. There's no possible way under heaven that we can frustrate that. What I mean by that is we can change it to make it good for us and not be in God's design. We have to be in God's design. We have to realize that God's design is for our happiness and for as He said, I've told you all this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. We on our part are looking for happiness and we miss joy. Joy is the inner recesses of the heart. Joy, when we're at joy, we're at peace and in love. When we're happy for a time, but we can quickly become just as unhappy because we set things up for ourselves. So Built for God is an attempt to try to bring people into God's love, into God's love in our church, the Catholic Church, and to begin to sort of look at people who are in other religions and other churches, and to begin to say, this is what we have to offer you. This is what we all have to offer you. And it's good, and it's very good, and to realize that that goodness, can find a home in each one of us. And we so often we have this sense of, well, I'm this, I'm that, and I'm going to live that for the rest of my life. And that basically you're lying to yourself, because God said, I want you with me. And sure enough, we can get to God through other faiths and religions and so forth. But the true way, the only way, the best way is to build for God. We're built for God, and that has to prosper. We may have a lot of prejudice about other churches. They may have a lot of prejudice about us, but we need to sort of get rid of the obstacles and begin to unite. It's an ecumenical thing in one way, but it's more than that. It's truth. It's truth, the truth of God's design. There's a sort of a philosophy going around, or a mindset that, we can build our own way to God. We can build our own way to heaven. They failed in Genesis 5. They failed in Exodus. They failed in 1517 with the construction of so many new churches. So today, I'm inviting you to learn more about built for God, and to be able to see what's possible. I was impressed the other day on the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, when it said that the Annunciation, for God nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible for God. But what we think is possible is impossible for us. So in that sense, to understand, what God has given us, the antecedent will. The antecedent will is the will that when God made us, He made us to be saved. He made us be with Him for all eternity. It says in Galatians chapter 1, how foolish you are, Galatians, that what you have received, you have drifted away from it just as fast. So again, to be aware of what God is doing in your life. I have a famous statement that I always make. I said that God isn't finished with us yet. He's not finished with me yet. And He's not finished with you. God doesn't give up even though we give up. So Built for God is really a good program. It's a program I recommend to you. And if you need more about it, just consult my office. And that's at 889-2558-909 area code. I thank you, and may God bless you.